Once again, this is Andy Collins with Tridea Partners. We're joined today by Concur. We're going to highlight their travel, expense, and invoice products by Concur. They've been a long-time partner of ours. We've got dozens and dozens of clients using their products today. So we're excited to have them, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it right over to Russ Reininger. So Russ, are you with us? I think we're ready to get started.
I am. Thanks for the intro, Andy. And I'll start off with a big thank you from Tridea and Concur to everyone that's in attendance today. So wanted to start off, I know this was included in the invite we sent out, but we are offering a special offer to everyone that attended today, just as a thank you for your time and interest in Concur and Tridea. So we give you an initial 90-day agreement term with Concur. We're going to waive all fees for that for attendees, and we're going to give you some pretty steep discounts as well if you do decide to come on board with us. So with that, let's jump right into it. I put this slide up here because this really summarizes sort of what I hear from businesses that I chat with every day. They're looking to generally try to accomplish one of these overarching goals, right? So whether you're trying to increase revenue growth, improve operating efficiency, attract and retain new talent, develop new products or services, or enter new markets or distribution channels, most folks are generally starting to turn towards and look towards technology and software to help them achieve these goals, right? So before I can help you get there and help you achieve them, we want to sort of take a look at where you are today, right? So let's look at the typical spend breakdown for your SMB business today. So about 35% of your overall operating costs can be attributed to payroll, right? And most folks have already automated that and would never go back to processing payroll in-house, right? About 10% is attributed to travel and entertainment, and about 55% we categorize as everything else. So that's going to be your AP invoice spend, your vendor management, your utility bills and light bills, right? So what we're going to cover here today between travel and entertainment and everything else is roughly about 65% of your overall operating costs. So let's take a look at the typical manual process that I see today or businesses tell me about every day. So this is what it starts to look like, right? I put this up here, usually resonates with some folks, and I can definitely remember the days of a coffee-stained expense report, and there's been days for sure that my desk has felt like that. And this is why, right? So you have your employee out there incurring expenses, right? Whether they're travel related or not, or they're vendor invoice related, then they're compiling that onto either an expense report and or receiving an invoice from a supplier or from a vendor. On the expense side, it's usually on an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc. They're usually stapling or taping receipts on those, writing names on the back of those. I think folks can resonate with that process. And invoices, usually receiving that, either a paper packing slip or an emailed invoice in their inbox. So once those expenses and invoices are received and compiled, then they go through some form of an approval process, right? Whether that's to a direct manager, to another level for specific dollar amounts or departments, right? They either need to get approved or not. So a lot of times, if there's any mistakes, right, from the manual data entry, then we get to start that process all over again, right? It gets sent back to the employee or the vendor, right, to correct those mistakes, and we get to go through the process all over again. Once they're finally approved, then we actually get to remit payment and or reimburse employees, right? So that a lot of times will look like it'll come in the form of a hard check, right, to an employee and or, cutting and signing and mailing a hard check off to a vendor to remit payment. So what we have found is there's some operational issues with these manual processes, right? Compliance, anytime you have manual data entry, right? There's potential for issues with compliance, cost containment, right? Being able to have control over that spend. Anytime you have paper involved and or a back and forth process, right? You're going to have issues with efficiencies. And any manual process is going to have issues with visibility as well, right? If there's a paper invoice sitting on someone's desk for approval, right? You have no real-time insight into where that is in the process. And finally, employee satisfaction. I mean, let's be honest, it's 2016, right? Everything is mobile, and we're trying to automate everything as we can these days. I actually came from banking in a previous life, and I can remember the days of the lunch rush and the evening rush for folks to come in and make deposits and withdrawals, right? And honestly, now I can't remember the last time I went into a bank branch because it's just literally all done via online and mobile banking. And that's the exact same trend that smart expense reporting and smart AP invoice management is following. So I want to break down this invoice process in a little detail for you, right? Because this is the typical process, and usually the amount of steps involved in a manual invoice AP management process. So whether there's a PO involved on the front end or not, right? Usually once that order has been placed, you receive it, the supplier mails that invoice either via actual mail or email, right? You receive it, that invoice is stamped and coded. You then route it through multiple levels of approvers, right? And I've chatted with a lot of folks that it literally incurs just putting it on folks' desks and passing it around for actual signatures. You make a copy of that and file it away, and then route a copy off to headquarters. So AP receives that and audits it. Again, if there is any mistakes, right, then we get to start the process all over again. But once that's approved, then AP gets to actually manually enter that into the payment system, right? Then they'll file and store that on site for the minimum 2 years that's required, and usually cut and issue hard checks off to those vendors. So, you know, there's clearly some issues that can arise in a process like this. So anytime you have manual data entry, right, there's the risk of error, right, if a decimal point is off, what have you. Exception handling, cash flow management, lost invoices, duplicate invoices, even fraudulent invoices. I've heard some horror stories about companies paying invoices for vendors that they didn't actually do business with. So, you know, when you have a manual process like this, you don't have that visibility, you don't have those controls in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. What's the real life impact? For example, imagine a $25,000 unaccrued invoice sitting on someone's desk, right? Well, this is a real life example that happened to one of our clients, and as you can imagine, it had a pretty negative impact on their cash flow, right? So we want to make sure that doesn't happen to you guys. And what's the impact in terms of ROI? So when you look at a manual process per AP invoice, and these statistics are coming in from the Aberdeen Group, so a third-party consulting firm that has studied travel expense and invoice management. And typically, the average process time for an AP invoice in a manual process is just over 20 days. And when they add up all the costs associated with that, it comes out to just over $38. I mean, almost $40 per invoice, right? When you move on to an automated system, you can bring that down to under 4 days and just about $4 exactly per invoice. Total savings of over 10 days in terms of cycle time and $19 per invoice. If you look at the same stats per expense report, on average it's about 91 minutes to create and process that expense report, and that's costing the company just over $20 per expense report. With an automated system, we can get that average down to about 32 minutes, so cut it by about 2/3 and down to just over $12 per expense report. So savings of about an hour of time and just over $8 per expense report. So to put this in, add some color here as well, think about the amount of invoices that you process on a day, a week, a month, right? Or the amount of expense reports that you process. And you can see that these numbers start to add up pretty quickly. So let's talk about productivity, right? Maybe what we could do with some of this time that has been saved, right? Because that's really what we're trying to do. everybody's looking for more hours in the day, right? And we haven't been able to find any, right? But so this is a study from a recent study from the Accounts Payable Network, and as you can see here, the vast majority of folks in AP say that they spend most of their time on level 1 and level 2 productivity activities, right? So primarily clerical activities, exception handling, and you know, looking through trying to find issues and whatnot, and make corrections on paper elements. So what we want to do is give you back some of that time, find some efficiencies, and really let you focus on level 3 productivity, which is really what you were hired to do. So I'm sure at this point you're saying, yep, Russ, we know there's a problem, right? That's why we're here today. That's why we attended the webinar. So let's show you a solution to this. So we touched on this before, but I do want to reiterate, what we're talking about today really can have an impact on about 65% of your overall operating costs. We're going to take those paper expense reports, the paper invoices, those credit card statements and receipts, and we're going to streamline it. We're going to put it into a cloud-based system that you can access right from your desktop and or from your smartphone or tablet. So eliminating a lot of that clutter for you. Some of the benefits that we found in doing this, definitely an increase in efficiency, better compliance, better cycle times. You're going to have access and real-time visibility, and we're going to increase accuracy and integration with the system that you guys currently use. Speaking to integration, when you access and start using a system like Concur, not only do you access the tracking mechanism that we offer, but it's also the power of the ecosystem that we bring to the table as well. So, you know, our goal is really to eliminate the need to write an expense report in the traditional sense, right, and process an AP invoice in the traditional sense. And so we integrate with numerous apps that you guys use day in, day out. So for instance, I can just take an Uber and by using the Uber app, it can actually integrate with Concur and actually build out that expense report for me automatically. So let's take a look at a day in the life of using Concur. So we'll start with travel, look at expense, and then AP invoice. So great example, I can log into Concur, right, just from the desktop version or my smartphone or tablet, and I can actually book my business trip, right? So maybe I need to come down there to San Diego for our Lunch and Learn that we're hosting in a few weeks down there. So I can go on to Concur, book my business trip. We're going to build your travel policy into the booking tool so that I don't have to worry about if I'm going to get reimbursed for that Alaska Airlines flight or not. Now, this is going to automatically integrate with your expense report. So we're going to pull those travel reservations and start building out your expense report for you. Import those credit card transactions as well. Here's an example of an e-receipt that was imported direct from the vendor from a hotel that I booked through Concur. We can also import these for reservations that are booked outside of Concur as well through our TripLink service. But you'll notice you have the digital receipt image. We've actually line itemed out that hotel bill for you, really saving you a ton of time. I know that's one of the most painstaking processes of creating an expense report. And gone are the days of writing down folks' names on the back of receipts, right? That inevitably wear off or get crumpled or lost. We can track attendees for business meals electronically. You can do that from your phone and or import an Outlook calendar invite, for example, as well. So for receipt images that aren't necessarily travel related, right, you just snap pictures of those right from your smartphone. We'll import that. We actually use OCR technology to read the information off of the receipt image, create the expense line item, and match it to any corresponding credit card charges that you have linked with Concur as well. So again, just taking the legwork out of it for the end user. So a quick look at invoice, and then we'll dive in a little bit deeper here as well. But we use the same OCR technology, right, and scanning functionality in terms of invoices that we do with receipt images and expense reports. So we'll get that invoice image in a digital format for you so that you can receive it just like you see here, and we'll pull that information and populate it inside of Concur. So what that gives you really is complete invoice management. So If you do have a purchase request process already set up, we can complement that. Or if you need to use that functionality, we have it available for you inside of Concur as well. So then when you receive that invoice, whether it's in a paper format or an email format, Concur can actually handle the capture of that for you as well. So eliminating those emails and eliminating that paper from you so your desk doesn't look like that picture I showed you earlier. If there is a PO, then we'll automatically match those, right? And or notify you if they don't match. Once all that data is imported, we can route it through a custom approval workflow based on your needs, right? Whether there's additional approval levels for dollar amount, department, etc. And then we will actually help facilitate payment for those vendors as well. So we can set up automatic payments once it's finally approved for payment via ACH to your vendors. We can set up automatic email notification and authorization to charge your credit card on file, and or we can actually cut, issue, and mail checks to your vendors that want to receive it that way as well. And finally, and I'll touch base on this a little bit later as well, but now that you're tracking all the one centralized area, you have the ability to report on it and really dive into the data. So we'll touch base on that as we go through as well. Oh, we're frozen. So let's dive into the actual invoice tool here for you. When we import the invoice, you'll notice on the right there, you actually have the digital invoice image, right? As we import that, we use our optical character recognition to pull the data off of the invoice and populate it inside of Concur, right? So the invoice header details, the line items, the totals, taxes, we'll pull all that off and populate it for you. We'll automatically assign it to whoever it needs to go to, right? And we'll match it to your pre-approved vendor list that's housed inside of Concur as well, again, to make sure that it's a vendor that you actually do business with. By assigning an expense type, we're going to automatically code this as well. So the same concept in the expense side, where we'll handle the coding for you just by assigning it to an expense type. If there is a PO included, again, once all this data is populated, we're going to go through and automatically match those for you. Or if there's some discrepancies, we'll notify you, right? If maybe you only received half of what you ordered, we're going to make sure that we notify you, tell you there's a discrepancy so that you can dive in a little bit deeper on that. Here's an example of what this automated workflow could look like, right? A little bit cleaner than the previous manual process that we went through earlier. And so we can have that expense report or that invoice routed through approval. Once accounting receives it and processes it, we can issue reimbursements to employees, vendor payments. We'll sync that data with your ERP, and again, then you have access to actually pretty robust reporting capabilities so that you can actually analyze that data and make actionable business decisions based on it. And here's the best part. You can do it all on the go, right? You can literally do all of this just from your smartphone. Here's an example of the dashboard that you can have access to inside of Concur. Again, real-time access to where your spend is going, right? How can you make adjustments if you can't see where you are right now, right? And some quick examples of some of the reporting features available to you as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Andy here briefly to chat about how Concur and Dynamics can work together.
Great, thanks, Russ. Can you go ahead and go to the next screen, Russ? That'd be helpful.
Of course.
So, yeah, so Concur really provides some advanced technology that allows us to interface with their platform. So probably the most common scenarios will pull over either a journal entry or an AP expense into the Dynamics ERP products. And that's through the kind of the integration tools that are provided through the Dynamics platform. But we can also then interface where we're pushing back information. So for example, on the on the invoice side, we can actually, as we create new vendors in the ERP or set up new accounts, we push those back over to Concur so that when you're capturing that AP, information, the vendors appear, the appropriate GL accounts exist over in Concur. We can also interface from a PO perspective. So Russ had mentioned briefly that they can do a requisition, a PO, and then when they receive out that PO, we can transfer that information over to the ERP. They provide, again, typically on the expense side, a file format that 254 some columns, and then we can automate the import of that, or it can be a manual process where you can review before posting in the ERP. So there's really a lot of different ways. We've probably done a couple dozen of different integrations with Concur, really depending on how they're using Concur, whether they're using things like requisitions in the ERP system, because that obviously then changes how we interface the two applications. But again, it's very flexible. We've got a number of kind of canned integrations we've provided to clients, and it really depends on your unique scenario. So go ahead, Russ, if you want to just kind of wrap it up here in the next couple slides.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that insight there, Andy. So one final element as well here as we reach the end here, but it's very important whenever you're evaluating, especially a cloud solution, right, like Concur, to take security into play here. So, as part of one of the largest publicly traded companies in the world, we're held to the highest security standards of any company out there. I have more security documentation than you would probably ever want to read through. I'm happy to send it out if you want some light reading for the weekend. But you can rest assured that your data is safe with us. And if you're ever lucky enough to get audited, you're actually in the best possible hands, because we are the trusted provider for the U.S. federal government. They know how to use us because they use us every day, and it's going to make that audit all that much easier. A couple quick stats about Concur as a company. About 25 million users, just over 9,000 SMB clients in North America. We'll be at 10,000 after this webinar. I can feel it. We have about 33,000 clients globally. But the fact that I'm most proud of here is the high client satisfaction. So we have an over 95% client retention rate as well. And with that, if you want to learn more, absolutely schedule a customized demo with myself, Russ Reininger. You can shoot me an email, russ.reininger@concur.com, or call me direct at 425-590-5645. Or we're going to have an on-site lunch and learn actually coming up on March 17th at Ruth Chris Steakhouse down there in San Diego. So we'll have the whole Concur crew out there, and it'll be a really good time. So please come out and join.